Hello, everybody. Welcome back to World Talks here on TVP World. My name is Don Arleth. Now, in just a few weeks, the new Trump administration managed to upend the post-World War II global order, or at least it certainly seems that way right now. Now, next week, Ukraine will send the presidential chief of staff, Andriiy Yermak, to Saudi Arabia to meet with the U.S. delegation and attempt once again to engage in meaningful talks for a ceasefire and, of course, a peace agreement in Ukraine. There are a lot of uncertainties moving forward with such talks, to say the least. Meanwhile, European leaders held an extraordinary meeting in Brussels today, as the continent must shore up its own defense and prop up Kyiv, as the U.S. seems to have folded a pretty good hand before negotiations with Russia has even started. And now joining me here to discuss in the studio is Editor-in-Chief of the Kyiv Post, Bohdan Nahaylo.
Good evening.
Hello. Thank you for coming in tonight. Really appreciate it. Now, I know that we're still grappling to get all the facts put together, but we saw Zaluzhny speak to the Chatham House, and we also see that, well, it was Zaluzhny himself saying that the global order is upended.
Yeah.
Do you think that the U.S. wasted a really good hand? Weren't they given a really good hand by the Biden administration, and they pretty much folded it on the table?
Exactly. They could have taken it a step further. The Biden administration was generous. It was understanding, but it failed to deliver on crucial things like long-range weapons that could have made a difference at the time. And the Biden administration, if we're to be critical looking back, was never set on Russia losing. It was more on containment of Russia and helping Ukraine contain Russia. The Trump administration could have gone a step further and said to Moscow, we are going to go that step further. We will give Ukraine the means to finish this, and that you will, whether you like it or not, have to either withdraw or settle on, let's say, acceptable terms. But instead, they've gone the other way, and they've thrown everything in the direction of Russia. They've criticized and taken steps against not only Ukraine, but just about any friend of America, instead of rallying the team together and showing the leadership that was expected of America. So Zaluzhny, I think his statement is very important. Why? Zelensky cannot say that. He's still trying to get as much support from the Trump administration as is salvageable at this stage, given what happened last week and etc. So he's still saying, look, let's make a deal, let's not make this any worse than it already is. You take into account Ukrainian interests, we realize your interests, let's meet halfway. Zaluzhny is saying what all Ukrainians feel, that this is a real sellout, it's a stab in the back of Ukraine. Note that Zaluzhny is the most popular figure in Ukraine at the moment. If there were elections, perhaps Zelensky would win again because of his leadership and standing up to Trump, but the most popular figure, given his command over the Ukrainian armed forces for the first 2 and a bit years of the war, is Zaluzhny. So coming from that and risking his position, unless there's some secret agreement behind the scenes with Zelensky, risking his position as ambassador, is a strong statement. Now, let me just add, the Biden, I'm sorry for the Freudian slips, the Trump administration has been pressing for elections in Ukraine. Zaluzhny is number one if he were to run, right? So maybe already this is a pitch towards the domestic audience, as if I'm not going to sell Ukraine out. I'm going to say and name things as they are, call a spade a spade. That may be one thing. The other thing is that perhaps he's appealing to the military, where he has a lot of support in saying, guys, I'm going to sell you out. And we know that Zelensky cannot say this, but let me tell the world what we really feel at this stage.
And as far as we know, I mean, we know that in back channels, the Trump administration has reached out to Petro Poroshenko as well as Yulia Tymoshenko,
Yes.
but we don't know anything about Zaluzhny. While we're on his subject, I'd like to ask you about what he said about nuclear weapons, that based on what we're seeing right now and the current situation, maybe Ukraine needs to go it alone and develop its own nuclear capability.
This is becoming increasingly the topic of the day in Ukraine, not because Ukraine wants to be a nuclear country. It gave up its potential nuclear arsenal, as we know, after the collapse of the Soviet Union in return for so-called guarantees, which were never delivered.
Right.
And so it has a claim to make. And people are saying, well, why is it that the Trump administration is prepared to not only defend the skies of Israel, but to support its nuclear stance? Why does Pakistan get away with it? India get away with it? Many other states. Okay, America's not happy with Iran's nuclear program, right? But why can't Ukraine, on the eastern border of Europe, have a nuclear deterrent? Not that it's not going to use it against the West. Hopefully it would never use it against the East, right? But it's a deterrent. And you see the reaction already in Russia. Oh my God, it's tantamount, it's even worse than NATO membership if Ukraine were to become a nuclear power. We're not talking about huge interballistic missiles. We're talking about perhaps tactical nuclear weapons that would at least keep the Russians at bay.
Right. Now, concerning the latest implication, what is your assessment on the latest implications of suspending U.S. aid to Ukraine as far as weapons goes, as well as intelligence sharing that's been taken?
It's a very grave move. Again, it's part of that backstabbing. Ukraine hasn't been assassinated. It will fight on. It's still got the courage, even bloodied, even wounded. But this is a real serious stab in the back. The question is it part of the blackmail that the Trump administration is using to saying, well, we'll suspend this for the moment if you play along, which means extortion, mineral, from Ukraine. You play along, you be a good shall we say, docile customer of the U.S. And for Ukrainians, and I think for Europeans who have read this smacks of 19th century colonialism. It's a kind like a protection racket. You pay us, we'll protect you so that the other bandits don't get in. But you pay us for. Look, I mean, since when has a NATO member, the leading NATO member, expected other countries? Ukraine is not a member, I hasten to add, but other NATO members are supporting Ukraine generously, Poland included, but Sweden now, Denmark, others, not just the obvious ones. Why is America, under this leadership, suddenly demanding you pay us for the protection that you've been giving us?
Well, it looks like our worst nightmares are coming true. We've talked about this for months now, trying to contemplate what Donald Trump will do. And I think this is beyond anyone's wildest expectations. It's actually the worst case scenario. That being said, if we listen to what Marco Rubio says, for instance, that these, when they ask him about, well, who really invaded Ukraine? And I mean, just the obvious things that Marco Rubio is on record. He understands, he knows the truth, but for some reason, there is a different narrative out there right now. And the only explanation that I can see from him that he's giving is that they want Russia to get to the table, and they say that there is no other way for that to happen than to spew these Russian talking points. And we still haven't found out what is going to happen when Russia says, no, we are not going to agree to a ceasefire, or no, we're not going to agree to A, B, C, or D.
Well, they've already said no. Mm-hmm. There's no sign of any give. The irony is that all the pressure has been on Ukraine and its allies. Blackmail, not just pressure, right? Extortion, as I put it before. And there's what is the pressure on Russia? Are there secret talks where Russia is being told that, sanctions will be, tightened even more, and, yes, immediately we'll give all your foreign assets to Ukraine in compensation for the damage that you've caused? There's no sign of that. And instead, Russia is being asked to act as an intermediary with Iran on nuclear weapons issues, right? Even China, if we see in the last day or two, through its European representative, has expressed some kind of, shall we say, implicit shock at the extent to which the Trump administration is now embracing, I wouldn't say courting, embracing. And this is horrible. Now, for people like Rubio and the others, they come across as sycophants. Their moment of glory has arrived, and simply their principles are being put aside. And even Kellogg's statement today, have you seen the latest statement that, the suspension of military aid to Ukraine and intelligence sharing and all that was like a pat on the nose of a stubborn mule. This is colonialist talk. Kellogg, the most moderate of them. I mean, this is pathetic. And what signal does that send? I'm not talking about Ukraine, but the rest of Europe. What kind of partnership do we have?
One question I'd like to throw out there, it's something that's been kind of burning in my mind lately. Since the United States is, I guess, turned towards Russia as a partner, is it fathomable that Ukraine could turn towards China as a partner? You have rare earth, you have a lot of agricultural products that China desperately needs. Could Ukraine realign itself with China, potentially leaving the United States out in the cold?
All this is possible. Remember, Ukraine looks towards Europe. It's a lost late European child. It wants to return to that family. That's its priority. But in terms of economic advantage and strategic perspectives, of course, China is a player. Remember, and people forget this, before 2022 and the full-scale invasion, China was Ukraine's main trading partner. It was larger than the EU, which is at present has that position. So China's not interested in Ukraine being destroyed totally, just as Turkey is not interested in the Black Sea becoming a Russian sea. Turkey is also a factor here. So if there is any modicum of a peace settlement that is lasting, not just a temporary ceasefire, we will see China active, we will see Turkey active, we will see some of the Arab states also active. It's not investment, it's job opportunities, it's the conduit, it's the corridor to Europe, if normalcy is to be restored.
Well, I'm afraid we're going to just have to take minute by minute and day by day. Bohdan Nahaylo, the editor-in-chief of the Kyiv Post, thank you very much for coming in today. And that concludes this edition of World Talks. Thank you for joining us. Have a wonderful evening, and we'll see you next time. Goodbye.